You must kill your darlings. Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are going to be taking a spoilery look at Kaiju number 8 B-side and what its finalization means for the rest of the story, and some theories that we've had about the main Kaiju number 8 plotline. There will be spoilers for all of Kaiju number 8 B-side, and for Kaiju number 8 itself, up to chapter 111. So if you don't want any of those, you can click away now. Check out the links below the video to get yourself a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, a collection of short, absurd science fiction stories. Available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Kill your darlings. That is one of the most fundamental pieces of writing advice. Right up there with if you put a gun on the screen in the first act, it has to be fired by the second act. What does that kill your darling means, though? As an author, you have certain things that you love to write, certain scenes that you just put a lot of your heart and soul in, but if they don't serve the flow of the story, you have to get rid of them. Now, excising something out of your story in the modern age with our digital editing is pretty easy. But another bit of advice that goes along with that is never get rid of it. Copy, paste to another document. I have entire documents in my computer of paragraph after paragraph that I've cut out of the main story. Maybe they'll go in their own story someday. Maybe it is a great scene, and this isn't the perfect story for it. Maybe it's just a terrible scene and you're just attached to it because of pointless sentiment. But you won't know that until later, until time has tried it. So take those, cut them out, put them aside. Now, I had wondered when Kaiju number 8 B-side came out why it was there. Generally, extra stuff like that is handled in a light novel, which takes a lot less effort from the mangaka. Why was Matsumoto putting this much effort into a second manga that Matsumoto was in charge of when the main manga was taking up, and the anime were taking up so much of Matsumoto's attention? Well, I think from the conclusion of Kaiju number 8 B-side, there were certain elements of the Kaiju number 8 story that Matsumoto felt needed to be addressed, but that Matsumoto did not feel, or the editor did not feel, could be smoothly addressed in the main story in the appropriate amount of time. So they cut these out of the main story and put them into B-side. What were those things? Two questions. Number one, which is not fully answered but is addressed, why was little guy, the little dragonfly kaiju that started this, looking for Kafka? What did that little guy mean when he said, "I found you"? And then B, it addresses a major seeming contradiction in the story. When we see the head of the defense force around that table for the first time, when they're discussing the fact that Kaiju number 8 has just been revealed to be a defense force officer, they say, could this have something to do with that other country? That is, I don't think they said that other country, but the implication was that other country that is doing kaiju tissue to human hybrids, putting kaiju tissues in humans. Now, at the moment, that made sense. Okay, so Japan is not sticking kaiju tissues directly in humans with the point of making weapons. They use kaiju tissues and kaiju technology to heal people, but they're not deliberately making weapons by sticking kaiju tissue in people. But then we see Captain Narumi with his kaiju eyes, and the obvious implication was that those were just his eyes, and they'd replaced his normal human eyes with kaiju eyes, which would mean that Japan was the country that has for several years now been doing kaiju experimentation where they stick kaiju tissues in people. And so that seeming contradiction has been bothering me since the early 30s in the chapters. And what Kaiju number 9 B-side, Kaiju number 8 B-side did was address this, as well as a third issue, which is Kaiju number 9 generating all the kaiju or just some of the kaiju? So let's look at what Kaiju number 9 B-side addresses. When we see Captain Narumi show up on the Defense Force radar, he's a child, a teenager, a punk, and he shows up and he's wielding a kaiju corpse to fight these praying mantis type kaiju. And the Defense Force is shocked. They study him, but it turns out that he has an inherent ability to synchronize with kaiju tissues. And through Hasegawa, we learn that the kaiju tissues in the suits are specially attuned to human flesh. So basically, for the vast majority, basically up to this point, all known kaiju officers have had to have the industry, the rich boy's dad, takes the kaiju tissue, specially attunes them to human flesh. How, we still don't know, and then puts them in these very much mass-produced suits that allow the officers to draw out the stored power of the kaiju. But here in Jin Narumi, we have a human who can do that without the attenuation process. How? They don't know. It's a mystery even to the Defense Force at this point. But interestingly enough, he had lost his entire family in a kaiju attack. So there was a major kaiju attack. He lost everything. And then suddenly, he has the ability to attenuate to kaiju. This is not proof in any sense, but it is a massive clue that, because the big question has been, why? Why was the little guy looking for Kafka? Why did the little guy say, "I found you" when he met Kafka? If this is as big a clue as I think it is, if Jin Narumi's compatibility is as big a clue, then perhaps what the little guy was looking for was not Kafka specifically, but a human who had this ability to naturally attune to kaiju fibers. Because Kafka never had his combat potential measured before that point. This would imply that there is something similar between Jin Narumi, the orphan who lost everything in a kaiju attack, and Kafka, who lost everything except for his family in an early kaiju attack. But both Kafka and Jin Narumi lost their schools, their houses, every physical thing was lost. Kafka got to keep his family and friends, Jin Narumi didn't. I think we can safely say that this is a clue that we're looking at here, that the reason that the little guy was looking for Kafka was the little guy was looking for a host with a super high kaiju compatibility level. And Jin Narumi might have been it, but perhaps there was a different levels of compatibility. Maybe the little guy was just closer to Kafka at the time that he was looking. Maybe Kafka was the first human with this ability that the little guy was able to find, because as the Defense Force says quite clearly, this is super rare. Jin Narumi was the first one they found with that level of compatibility. Okay, I was going to make this one video, but I'm already nearly 10 minutes in, and I've only addressed the first issue. Why the little guy might have been chosen Kafka, and how Kaiju number 8 B-side addresses that, which is probably the core main issue of the series. But I still haven't got to Jin Narumi's eyes and what that implies about that other nation, or how many Kaiju number 9 is responsible for generating, and what that means for the ecology of this world and what the Defense Force can expect to face. It looks like I'll be getting into that in future videos, but what do you think? Does the fact that Jin Narumi appears to have been a one-of-a-kind sensitive, able to attenuate to kaiju tissue on his own without having that kaiju tissue gone through the industrial process of Izumotech, does that indicate that the reason that the little guy was looking for Kafka specifically was that Kafka was another one of those 1 in 7 billion people, or 2 in 7 billion at this point, who have that high attenuation level? Probably Kafka has an even higher attenuation level than Jin Narumi if this theory pans out. What do you think, though? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.
Escape into another world with the writings of author Betty Adams. 2 worlds, one of utter absurdity, one of dramatic tension, both alike in aliens absolutely astounded by human behavior. Humans are weird, short, absurd, science fiction stories, flying sparks, dragons, aliens, and things that go boom in the night.
Books available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, Google Play Books, and at authorBettyAdams.com for a signed copy.